Good evening, Gesunden Zummer, as Klal Yisrael is noig to say after Pesach, that we wish everyone a healthy summer season and that we should see and realize all the Shefa Rav, the beautiful bracha of the Yemei Chag, excuse me, HaPesach. We hope that this Shabbos, which is Shabbos Mevorachim HaChodesh, Chodesh Iyar, which the Bnei Yissaschar stands for the two ways that Klal Yisrael spell Iyar. Some spell it Aleph Yud Reish, which stands for Ani Hashem Roifecha, and there are others who spell it Aleph Yud Yud Reish, which is Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Rachel, which are the Daled Raglei HaMerkava, the holy heavenly chariot that Hashem rides in. Now, obviously, it's a metaphor because there's no physical chariot and Hashem doesn't ride anywhere, but it tells us that there is a unbelievable ruchnius, a spiritual level of the month of Iyar that carries in it a full month of Sfira. Because Pesach, we begin counting Sfira, but the first half of Chodesh Nisan, there is no Sfira. We only have the second half. And for Chodesh Sivan, we only have 5 days that we count Sfira. The 6th day is Shavuos. But Iyar has a full month of counting of Sfira each and every day. And says the Bnei Yissaschar, that's the reason that Rashi Tefillin corresponds to Nisan, which is a Chodesh of Isarusa de la Eila, that there is a influx of heavenly bracha to the entire month without us doing anything. It's a gift from heaven. But the month of Iyar corresponds to Rabbeinu Tam, which is higher than the Rashi Tefillin. And it's for the entire month. So says the Bnei Yissaschar. Now, we know that Sfira imbues and imparts and instills ingredients of ruchnius that we do not have a whole year. That means when we say Gevurah Sheba Chesed or Teferes Sheba Malchus, all these combinations are different doses of spirituality that include in our neshamas the unbelievable level of drenching our neshamas with the power of that combination and the characteristics of those two midas, which are incorporated by us simply saying the counting. We make the bracha and we say which day it is, and that opens up that treasure chest. And that's an entire month of Iyar. Haba Aleinu L'Toiva. The second thing I want to mention to you is that the Tamei Minhagim brings the Chosheva Minhag that women who bake challah for Parsha Shemini, for the Shabbos after Pesach, is because on Pesach we stop saying myriad HaGeshem, and the Gemara says that one of the maftechos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one of the keys for this world that Hashem holds for himself to do and does not give it over to any goodwill ambassador, a malach, is Geshem. the gift of the rain. Now, if that mafteach, that key from HaKadosh Baruch Hu was taken away because we stopped saying Morid HaGeshem, and since we know that Challah is a simon of Parnasa, so brings the Tamim and Hogim, that Hashem's not there to give the Geshems, so to speak. We stopped saying that Bakosha in Shemona Esrei, so it now comes after Pesach, and not to be left without the Segula for Parnasa, we begin with actually baking the challah and putting a key, which the Hebrew word for key is mafteach. So the mafteach is removed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Geshem during Pesach, and Klal Yisrael reinserts the mafteach of Parnasa into the symbolism of putting the key into the challah, the Shabbos after Pesach, and all the women who bake challah or should begin baking challah do so on Erev Shabbos after Pesach. Now, this week's Sedra, Parsha Shemini, which most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, is the Shabbos immediately after Pesach. And the opening three words is Vayehi Bayom HaShemini, that they had finished all of the preparation and they waited from Hanukkah until Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and Chof Gimel Adar, they began the process of celebrating and dedicating and beginning the actual avodah of the Mishkan with the Korbanos. And our Sedra begins, Vayehi Bayom HaShemini, it was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and it was the 8th day, and Moshe Rabbeinu told Aaron to go over and to go to the Mizbeach, Krav el HaMizbeach v'aseh eschatoscha v'ezolasecha, that he was told to begin the Seder of the Korbanos, but he was very hesitant. So the Medrash says, and the Gemara says, that Aaron HaKohen stood still. He told him to go ahead and begin, but he didn't, because he was very hesitant, because he felt that the Shekhinah did not come down yet, and the reason why it had not entered into the Mishkan yet was because of him. He was the problem, that he had a hand in making the egel, and as you see at the beginning, 2 psukim, that they brought a korban which corresponded for an atonement for the actual golden calf, for the egel hazov, and a seir izim, a goat, which was brought as a kapara for the fact that they sold their brother into slavery. And Aaron felt that meantime he was ready to start, but the Shekhinah didn't come. It must be that I am defective. Because even though I was legitimately stalling for time, that they shouldn't make the egel, and that I should be able to buy enough time, and that you, Moshe Rabbeinu, will return, but I still had some hand in it of how the tactic I was using in producing. Let's not forget that there was a heated group there. Chur got up and said, "What are you doing? You just got the Torah 40 days ago on Har Sinai, and now you're making a intermediary, as the Ramban says, not mamash avodah zorah, but you're making an egel. And if you're doing that, and they stopped him and they said they went and they killed Hur. And when Aaron came to try to stall them, they said, listen, you saw we just killed Hur, we'll kill you also. So he was treading on very dangerous water in trying to get them not to do it. But he felt that at the end they did it. And he was there in the process. So he said, you know why the Shekhinah is not coming down? It's me. And the Meforshim are very quick to point out that when something bad happens, the Shekhinah didn't come, that people would look at a different reason other than themselves. They wouldn't even think it's them. It's like the Rav who gives a drasha and he's talking about the tznius, or he's talking about the lashon hara, or he's talking about the talking during Kriyas HaTorah. And he's sitting there as the Rav is speaking and thinking, yeah, that guy over there, Shimon, I hope he's listening well, because the Rav's really talking about him. And about any problem or any issue that the Rav will talk about, he'll think he's addressing it to somebody else, but not himself. And over here we learn that when a problem arises, don't use the rationale of looking at someone else. Internalize it yourself, that you are the one that the Rav is speaking about, and you need improvement, and you need uplifting to be able to be sensitized to the issue at hand, but not somebody else, not always looking at somebody else who probably is worthy of the criticism or the inference of the Rav or the speaker, whoever is involved. Now, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Livracha, once asked, why does the Torah begin this parsha Vayehi Bayom Hashmini? That it should have said Vayehi Bayom Harishon. I mean, why start at the end of the 8 days? And now it was Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and they began, Nachshon ben Aminadab brought his korban for his shevet as part of the dedication and celebration of the beginning of the avodah of Klal Yisrael in the Mishkan. So that whole process, it should have, why do you come in at the end? So said the Rosh Yeshiva that many people don't look at the effort of everything that happens, but they only look at the bottom line. But there was a reason, because to answer this question, he quoted a medrash, and the medrash says that Aaron HaKohen began on the 8th day, and it doesn't say Vayehi Bayom Harishon, because of the pasuk Uvayom Hashmini Yimol Besar Orlo. So we know that a baby boy born is supposed to have his bris on the 8th day. Now, really, and the Medrash asks as part of the quote, why don't we have a bris on the 1st day? It means, why do we wait the 8 days? So the Medrash answers and says, because Hashem wants everyone to be happy at the bris. And if the bris was the 1st day, then everyone would be happy and wish Mazel Tov and say we should be Magadol, the baby, LaTorah, LaChuppah, LaMasim Tovim. But the father and mother would not be happy. Because min HaTorah, parents or a couple cannot be intimate and cannot begin the process of being together according to the Torah until 8 days. You have to wait 1 week. We know that's not the halacha of what we do. We wait much, much longer because of the D'Rabbanan, because the Chazal said that that's the D'Oraisa, but we institute a different mode of behavior for the father and mother, a longer process. But according to the Torah, that for a week the husband and wife are separated, if you made the bris the first day, then they would not be so happy that they cannot be at the bris happy knowing that they've got to wait another week. And says the Medrash, but it was instituted the 8th day, and this is a Medrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I want everybody happy, even the father and mother. And once you've waited the week till the bris, then the week is up, and Midiraisa, Min HaTorah, they can be together, so they will be happy also. The point being, because normally you're not allowed to draw blood on Shabbos. And why do we make a bris on the 8th day on Shabbos? Because the pasuk says so. Uvayom Shemini yimol b'sar loso. So we learn from this Chazal that when a person is at a simcha, he has to contribute to the beauty, the luster, the atmosphere of gladness and happiness where he finds himself. Because here HaKadosh Baruch Hu told you to wait the 8 days so that even the father and mother can be happy. And that's our job and responsibility as we come to a simcha, and if there's something that you're in a bad mood about, or you see something at the bris or at the event that you don't like, keep quiet. Keep quiet, because the Medrash says this in regard to Aaron, that it says that when his 2 sons in our Seder died, Vayidom Aharon, he kept quiet. So the Medrash asks, Mahavalei Lamemar, what? And he kept quiet, and we praise him that he didn't say anything. The Medrash asks, what could he have said? Or what should have he had said? And that's the Medrash that answers, Uvayom Shemini yimol b'sar orloso. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at a celebration, you want everybody happy. Today is the first day of the Chanukas HaMishkan. And on that day, my 2 said, you felt they had to die? I have no question. But why do it on the first day? Wait till we're finished with the dedication. Do it the day before. I mean, imagine if you're building a brand new shul and they're having the Suda and they're bringing in the Sifrei Torah and they're dancing and the music is going and everyone's so happy, and then suddenly 2 of the key people in that shul die. They suddenly drop. That whole celebration is turned into a terrible atmosphere. That was what Aaron could have said. You had Uvayom Shemini yimol b'sar orloso. You wanted even the parents of the baby to be happy, so you waited till the 8th day. Why didn't you wait either before or after to take them if you felt that they were due the debt or the penalty of dying? So the Rosh Yeshiva said that's why it says Vayihi Bayom HaShmini, and it doesn't say Vayihi Bayom HaRishon, quoting that medrash. Now, at the very beginning, the pasuk says, Vayikra el Moshe, Vayihi Bayom HaShmini, Kara Moshe, Li Aharon uLevanav uLeziknei Yisrael. And the question asked is, why is Ziknei Yisrael mentioned? First of all, by every gathering, if he was speaking to everyone, obviously the Ziknei Yisrael were there. So why does the pasuk mention and stress and underscore that there were Ziknei Yisrael there? Now, of the 2 korbanos brought, as I said before, one korban was for the Chet HaEgel, to be a kapara for Klal Yisrael having brought the Egel. And that was one of the reasons that the Mishkan was erected. And the second being the Sir Izim of Klal Yisrael for the fact that they sold their brother. Now, really, the Medrash and Chazal say that it wasn't for selling of the brother. It was the fact that they took a Sir Izim and they killed it and they dipped the Ksoinis Pasam into the blood. That's the reason that they brought now the kapara with a Sir Izim. So some Meforshim say, because when they sat down as a Bezdin, the brothers, the Shivtei Kah, why didn't they say to each other, what are we doing over here? We have who to ask. We have our father Yaakov. And if we felt that Yaakov Avinu was too close to Yosef, or we could not ask Yitzchak. When they sold their brother, and they did this with dipping into the blood, Yitzchak was alive and well. Why didn't they go to the yeshiva of Shem ve'Aver, which still existed? Not Shem and not Aver, but they were still a yeshiva, as the Chazal say. So why didn't they go ask? Because the cementing factor of Klal Yisrael throughout the Doros was that we always had who to ask. Whether it was the Shoiftim, or the time of the Nevi'im, or it was regular tzaddikim, regular Hasidish Rebbeim, Rabbonim, Rosh Yeshiva. Klal Yisrael never moved on its own successfully without asking and without direction. We don't do as a Klal Yisrael without the Ziknei Yisrael. And that's why, as a kapara for the Egel, which they could have asked before they did it, they could have turned to the tzaddikim of that generation, to Chor or to Aaron or to whomever, and asked their opinion. Or before they went and sat as a Bezdin or took it on their own shoulders to do what they did, and they had to pay a big price. Because as I've told you many times, the Shivtei Kor could not be killed for the Aveira of selling him and getting the money, those shoes that they bought, that they could have redirected their attention, but they didn't. And they paid a terrible price 1,600 years later with the Hariga, with the killing of the tzaddikim. Tzaddikim gemurim, bigger than the Malochim. The Tanoim that were killed to pay off the debt of the penalty. The fact that they did not redirect what they did and take advice from someone who would have told them, don't do it. So that's why, as part of this kapara, the pasuk stresses that they turned their sights to the Ziknei Yisrael, that they made sure that Klal Yisrael saw all the Ziknei Yisrael standing right there as a remez, a hint to the responsibility of a community in any city or in any shul. Ask the Rov, ask the Tzaddik, ask the Hasidic Rebbe. Get guidance before you make a major move. And that's how we have existed all of the time. Now, in our Seder, there's two words, Darosh, Darash, Moshe. And we are told that this is the split of the Torah. That means if you begin at the beginning of Bereshis with Bereshis bara Elokim, you will come halfway of the entire Torah, the five Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of the Chumoshim. The first Darosh is the last word halfway from the beginning of the Torah. The second word, the next word, Darosh, Darash, is the beginning of the second half of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Now, Chazal point out, why was the Torah split in half by those 2 words? Darosh, Darash. And many Meforshim say, and they quote the Gemara, Hani Bavle Tipshoi, that there were in Bavel many fools who used to stand up for a Sefer Torah, but when a Talmud Chacham came in, they barely took notice. They didn't stand up. And the Gemara calls them tipshoi, fools, that they don't realize and recognize that the embodiment and the totality of the possession that a Talmud Chacham, if he spent his life learning Torah and what he was doing, that wasn't something that required him to acknowledge properly with standing up or with coming close to give the proper dignity and kavod to the Talmud Chacham. And the Gemara cites on that statement that it was Yom Kippur and there was a lady who was expecting, and she became, and we know that if a woman who's pregnant and says she must eat, most 95% of the time we give her to eat. Even the Gemara says if there's a whole group of doctors that says she doesn't have to eat, but we give her to eat because her own feeling will direct us to a proper decision. So there was a woman who was expecting, and she suddenly smelled something, some food, and she said, I must eat it. And Rabbeinu HaKadosh was, I guess, nearby, And they told him what's going on, and he went over to the woman. He whispered in her ear, "Today is Yom Kippur." And the woman subsided. She calmed down. And from her, and she didn't eat, and from her came Rabbi Yochanan. That baby that was inside of her was Rabbi Yochanan, the very big Amoira. And right there, the Gemara continues that the other woman, the same thing happened, and she didn't hold back from eating. She ate, and she had a son who was a Rosh Gomor. His name was Shabsoi. So the Gemara asks, what was this kid, this Shabsoi, that grew up to be such a Rasha? What did he do? So the Gemara says, Otsar Peri, that he cornered the market in the fruit market. Cornering the market simply means that someone had the influence, either through money or through power or through whatever, to corner a market, which means they controlled the entire price of that item. For whatever the reason was, they gained control, and no one could tell them no. That what they decided was the price had to be the price. So the Meforshim are very curious. I mean, that's why he became a Rosh Gomer. The Gemara calls him a Rosh Gomer. So they answer and explain that the reason why it was, because what's a person who controls the price, corners the market? He wants for him, the world exists only for himself. In other words, he probably has plenty of money, because you corner the market, you squeeze the people. So he wanted more and more and more. And that didn't mean just cornering that. That was an attitude of everything begins with myself and ends with myself. And nothing else in the world is important. It showed an attitude of from the day of his birth to the day of his death, that the world began and ends with him. And that person is never happy because he never gets enough. So the reason that he became so infatuated with cornering the market was because he was infatuated with himself. Never growth, only more and more and more. And we have to season our attitudes to what we have and to what our goals are. You know, there are some people that work 8 hours a day, and they come to a point that they're working 10 hours a day, that the wife says, oh, our next door neighbor got a new $100,000 kitchen. Look at my kitchen, it's functional, but it's not what she has. So the man says, listen, I'm making nice parnasa, but if you want me to get you a $100,000 kitchen, I'm gonna have to go work for 4 hours more each day and give up coming home and having dinner with the family and giving up the time of being able to open a Gemara for an hour or two. Their whole lives are redirected because of the direction of what they want in the Gashmias, and it overwhelms the scheduling and the activity of their life, of everyday life, their learning, their children, their family, everything that they do. And that's called self-centered. And anyone, and I only gave an example, Chas v'shalom, women should have beautiful kitchens, but but not that it changes the mode of existence. And that's what this guy, this Shabsoi, ended up doing and participating with. Now we know in this parsha that it was the first day of Chodesh Nisan, and there's a story that Nadav and Avihu tragically died, and the Medrash says that they were bigger than Moshe and Aaron. That's how big the tzaddikim they were. And it says that therefore Aaron became an oinein lo aleinu lo aleichem, is when a person loses a relative that they have to sit shiva for, but it's before the kvura. After the kvura, after the burial in the cemetery, they become avelim. So you don't say to them when you hear the news before the funeral, Hamokim Yenachem Eschem B'toch Shar Avei Tziyam V'Yerushalayim, because that's not a halacha to say that, or to comfort relatives or people who have to sit shiva till they become avelim. And they're not avelim, they're only oinanim, which is a dioraisa the first day. That's why people don't daven. We don't make a bracha on food until the burial. And then they become avelim, lo aleinu, lo aleichem. No one should have to experience it. So Moshe Rabbeinu, there were 3 korbanos which were brought that day. The first one was Nachshon ben Aminadav, which was brought by each shevet each day, as you know very well. And the first day was Nachshon, and he had to bring that korban. And there was a korban for being Rosh Chodesh, that every Rosh Chodesh there is a Seir Izim Lechatos that has to be brought, not only that month, but every month for eternity. And there was a third one for the fact it was Miluim, it was the 8th day. It was the completion of the 8 days of what they had to do in those 8 days. Till Nachshon brought his korban, so they brought a korban for the conclusion of the Miluim. So it was 3 korbanos. Now Aaron was an oinein, and his 2 sons, Elazar and Isamar, were also oinenim. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, you are to eat from all 3 korbanos, even though you're an oinein, and usually an oinein does not eat from it. So the Torah tells us that Aaron and his 2 sons ate from only, the 2 were only a korban for the sha'ah, as Rashi brings. That means it was a one-time korban. Nachshon didn't bring another korban. He brought that one time for his shevet, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The other 2 were only for that day. But for Rosh Chodesh was going to be every Rosh Chodesh. It was forever. But the other 2, Nachshon and the Miluim, was only for that day. And Aaron and his sons only ate from the seer of Rosh Chodesh, because that is forever. But the ones for only that day, they didn't eat from. And the pasuk says, look in the Torah, look in the Parsha, Vayiktsov Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry at them, and he said, Lama lo achaltem, why didn't you eat from the other 2? And Aaron answered him and explained, because that's only chayish, that's only for the moment, for that day, and that we as oinim are not allowed to eat. So in other words, they criticized Moshe Rabbeinu, and the pasuk ends those few psukim. Vayishma Moshe. Moshe heard what he answered. Vayitav be'enov, and he was very happy with, and he admitted his mistake. A true leader has to be ready even if he's standing in front of Klal Yisrael, 1,000 congregants, a menal of a yeshiva with 10,000 has to be ready and willing publicly to admit his mistake, to admit what he said was a mistake. And that takes a lot of koyach and a lot of courage. A person right away could, with rationale, if I'm going to admit the mistake, then they're going to start thinking I made mistakes in other things. And if I admit the mistake, the respect that they'll have for me is going to be lessened and decreased. A parent in a household is a leader. A teacher in a classroom is a leader. It doesn't have to be Gans Klal Yisrael, and it doesn't have to be the whole city. It can be just in your own home. But there is strength of character exhibited in front of children when parents admit a mistake. You know something? I made a mistake. Please forgive me. And that's the lesson of that pasuk, Vayishma Moshe, Vayitav be'enov. A second lesson we can learn from this is that when Moshe Rabbeinu got angry, he spoke to Aaron's two sons. In other words, he said, why didn't you eat? Aaron was standing there, but he didn't face Aaron and he didn't say it to Aaron. He was standing right there. But he criticized the two sons. So Rashi tells us, why didn't he say it to Aaron? Aaron led the group not to eat. So Rashi says, for the kavod of his brother, he directed the criticism to the two sons. We have to know that even when we're right and we're correct for taking a position and we claim principle, it's the right thing, it's the principle of the issue, we have to know how to handle the criticism, how we say the criticism, to whom we say the criticism, and the timing of the criticism. Sometimes you can't criticize in front of 300 people, or you can't criticize a child in front of every brother and sister. And we have to learn how and when to do the criticism, that we should be able to be consistent, and we should be able to maintain the dignity of someone. We want them to get the message, but we don't want to destroy the child or the student or the congregant, that they can't pick up their heads or they're too embarrassed, and that we're burying the child or the student or the congregant. Now, we have kashrus. And the Rambam, who wrote about kashrus, writes, he calls his Sefer Kedusha. Kedusha. Because we know that embodied in the food that we eat carries the Kedusha, and it's the only thing, also Tumma and Tahara of a person in their Kedusha level could be metamtim the lev, which means that we're drenching and dyeing, like not dyeing to be nifter, but dyeing the color of our neshama. That the tray food is probably the most powerful thing that can drench our neshamas through and through, and it becomes tameh. I remember I was once on the radio and the moderator asked me, why is it with the Jews, the liberal Jews, that they're so anti-Israel? I mean, after all, even if you're not religious, Israel's the promoter of peace. They never began any type of a war. It was always just response if children or people were killed. So why should a fair-minded person, and you find it by the reform especially, that Israel's guilty of this and guilty of that and that, why don't they step aside and with a view of fairness be pro-Israel without the Torah, just as a human being? So I answered them and I said that unfortunately there are groups of Jews who will go in their whole life, they're eating shrimp, they're eating ham and cheese, they're eating all sorts of treifus. And after 30, 40 years of doing that, their whole koyach of seeing correctly, whether it's in Kedusha, whether it's in Torah, or it's their reasoning, when it comes to something of Yiddishkeit, they can't think straight. Because they were metamtim their lev so badly that they can't see or think straight. And when it comes to something which makes perfect sense, they can't see straight. That's what I answered them. And that's why we have in one of the items that we eat, that are enumerated, is a bird called a da'ah. But in Re'eh, when the laws of kashrus are repeated in Devarim, it's not called da'ah, it's called ra'ah. So the Chazal ask, why is the name changed? So Rashi brings it that Roya Nevela, that they're standing in Bavel, and Veroya Nevela Be'eretz Yisrael, that this bird could see 50 miles away. It has eyesight and vision without any comparison. And it says that this bird, the name was changed from Da'ah, which was the real name, to Ra'ah, to what it sees, and called Ra'ah, because it stands in Bavel, in Iraq, and it looks into Eretz Yisrael and it sees Nevela, dead carcasses. So the Meforshim ask, if you want to accentuate and underscore the ability of this bird to have such vision, why not just say that it sees the waters of Israel, it sees the mountains, it sees the people, why does it use the word, the Chazal, the Medrash, in calling this bird Ra'ah, because it sees the Nevela in Eretz Yisrael? So they answer, the Meforshim answers, that because if it's treif, it can change the sense of goodness and proper character in the atzmius of the person. That when it looks from there with its unbelievable vision, it doesn't want to see the good. It's a treif animal. It wants to see the negativity. It wants to see the bad in Eretz Yisrael. You know, a lot of people sit here in America, oh, in Eretz Yisrael they should have done this, they should have done that, and there's people trying to have mixed prayer at the koisel, look how disgusting and look how terrible it is, this, that. I was once in a taxi in Eretz Yisrael, and I made a comment about that I thought that Eretz Yisrael should do this or do that, and the taxi driver turned to me and said, I would like to ask you in a very courteous way, where were you born? I said, I'm an American. And when you grew up, were you worried about a missile hitting your next door neighbor's backyard and killing the 2 children playing? Or were you in America growing up in which type of gym shoe, sneakers, and which flavor ice cream you should choose when you eat the ice cream of the day or the week or on Shabbos? We woke up every day, said the taxi driver, worrying about which cousin, which brother would be killed in the army or killed here or there. How could you as an American even think of And I said, I apologize, you are 100% correct. You're 100% correct. Because I can't be oimid bebavel and veroya nevela be'eretz Yisrael. You have to correct and you have to be in the position to feel the tsar and live through it, to open your mouth. And he was right. That's what we're talking about. That's what the Chazal say. This thing, the name was changed to Ra'ah because it was so totally out of order. And it was so unbelievably removed from everything of reality because it was tainted in its attitude, because it was treif. And that can bring the problem of vision for any yid who drenches his neshama with the shrimp. He becomes a different person in his eyesight. He is veroya nevela when it comes to Yiddishkeit and it comes to Eretz Yisrael. And I want to say to you that the Chazal Rashi brings that at the very beginning of our Sedra, that when Aaron was hesitant to go forth and he said, the Shekhinah didn't come because of me. So Moshe Rabbeinu answered him and said, you have to go over, don't look back, you have to go over and start being makriv the karbanos, lekach nivcharta, because you were chosen to do so. And that's your job at this point. But there are other Meforshim who say that lekach nivcharta is referring to the fact that he was shahaya bosh, that he was hesitant. That Moshe Rabbeinu said, because of your hesitancy, because of the fact that you don't want to do it and you feel you're not worthy of doing it, lekach nivcharta, that's why you were chosen. Because of your attitude. You didn't run forth in front of Klal Yisrael to do what you had to do as in this honorable first-time event. But you stood there silently because I'm not worthy of going forward and taking this honor. Lekach nivcharta, that's why you were chosen, because of this attitude, that you're hesitant and you don't want to forge ahead and become part and parcel of the outstanding everything that you do. Now, I'm going to conclude with a vort from the Ostrovtser Rebbe, who asked a question and said, and it's Nogea Sfiras HaOmer, which we are in the middle of, and Yidden should internalize the counting and the day, what it stands for, to grow with it, not to come in at the first day and do the counting and leave after the 49th day the same person. We should not just take the minute of counting, but we should think for a minute of what that day and the characteristics which come forth from it mean. So he asked a question that the Torah, when we were talking before about Dorosh Moshe, and that talks about the fact that Moshe, the Moshe of every Rav, of every shul, of every makom, of every teacher in a classroom, teaches and becomes the thinking process of every student and every person, that we mold, we shape, we uplift, we affect a person and a group by the attitudes that we say and that we impart with them. And that's what Chazal want to say, that the Chachamim have the power, because we know that the example given in the Torah of the power of the Chachamim is that in Devarim, it says that for certain types of transgressions, there's a punishment of malchus, which means lashing. And it says in the Torah 40 lashes. Now, lashes isn't just given. The person has to be warned. There have to be eidim. We don't just hit someone for nothing. But the Chachamim came and said that the lashes, it says in the Torah 40, we say it means 39, going into the 40th. So we don't hit someone 40 times, we hit only 39. So ask the Ufstrafzer if the Torah wanted to cite an example that the Chachamim have the power to be oiker. We have other examples which are much before Devarim. Sfiras HaOmer. The Torah says, Tisperu chamishim yoim, you're supposed to count 50 days, and Lamaisa we count only 49. Why? Because the Chachamim said that the Torah meant count and say 49, and the 50th day is in and of itself the elevation with going into Shavuos. So if you wanted to show the power of Chachamim, the mitzvah of Omer is in Parshas Emor, that's in Vayikra. Why do you have to wait till Devarim to cite the example with Malchus? So he said, because there's nothing more choshev than saving a yid from an extra lash and saving him the grief, the embarrassment, and the pain. And that supersedes everything. We could have cited Rosh Hashanah that you're supposed to count, you're supposed to blow shofar, and the Chachamim came and said, don't do it if it comes out on Shabbos. And we know the tremendous hashpah of Tekiyah shofar. Okay, the Mekubalim explained that the power of Shabbos fills in what we need from shofar, what we need of lulav and esrig on the first day of Sukkot, and that the Chacham said, don't touch it, it's muksa, don't do it. And they stopped everyone from touching a lulav and a esrig on Shabbos, and it's from the Chachamim. Even though the Torah says, Ulakachtem lachem, Bayom Arishon, pre-eitz hodar v'anaf, eitz avos v'arvei nochal, that we have a tzivui to do it, and we don't do it. And we could have cited all of those examples before the story, the psukim of Malchus in Devarim. And we could have cited an earlier thing, and like I just said, Sfiras Homer, but he said, in saving a Jew from pain, that supersedes all reasoning. and good reasoning, but a Yid is spared one lash. That is our shining example that we want to cite, clarifying and stating in the strongest way the example of Chachomim having a koyach. We should be able to shift our negativity. If we possess some negativity, try to wipe it out and save a Yid the embarrassment and the punishment and the pain and the tsar, not only by Malchus, but the lesson is by any case that we can jump up and be the one to eliminate the busha or the embarrassment, whatever it is, of another Yid. Do so in the most magnificent, powerful way. Bracha v'hatzlocha.